Hello, bonjour, hola, guten tag, and welcome to the MGRO Music Show. And I have to say, 2021 seemed like it was going to be a great year. I mean, there was the optimism that it was going to be better than 2020. There was, at least in the UK, the coronavirus vaccine being well spread out, and the hope that soon pubs, clubs, concerts, shops, and everything like that would all soon be restarting. But then Daft Punk had to split up. An event which sent shockwaves right across the music fandom and right across the majority of genres, whether, even outside of electronica and dance music, because, whether you're a pop fan who was a huge fan of the likes of Doja Cat, The Weeknd, and Dua Lipa, whether you're an indie fan who was aware of their influence on alternative in the latter parts of the 2000s, whether you're a hip-hop fan who loved their work with Kanye West, they just seemed to be one of those bands that had something for everyone, and so they appealed right across the spectrum, right across genres, and right across age ranges as well, whether you grew up with funk in the 70s, whether you grew up with MTV in the 90s, or whether you're just a big Kanye fan in the 2010s. There was something in Daft Punk for everyone, and that was what made them one of the most wholesome and unique bands of the past 30 years. So I was planning to do a video on the history of the French electronic scene anyhow, but considering the recent topical events, I've now decided to do a video on one of my all-time favourite bands. This is me exploring the legacy and long-lasting influence of Daft Punk. Firstly, we have their importance in establishing France as a juggernaut when it comes to electronic music. Like, if you look at a list of some of the most acclaimed and successful, more indie-leaning electronic artists from the past 20 years, you'll notice the majority of them are from France, and that firmly rests at the feet of Daft Punk, particularly in the sheer importance of them in elevating the success of the French house scene. What is French house? Well, it was a subgenre of electronica that emerged in France in the early 1990s, basically derived from taking influence from Chicago house in America, a type of house music that was more heavily based around sampling 70s funk and soul, again having a very disco-based influence, and also from hip-hop styles hip-hop production styles that were emerging around the time as well. I mean, you can get an idea of the influences behind French house from the Daft Punk track Teachers from their debut album Homework, where the track is basically them listing out who their influences were, including the likes of Armand Van Helden, DJ Tonka, Todd Edwards, Dr. Dre, and so on. The first artists of this scene being Le Funk Mob, Motorbass, and Saint Germain, but Daft Punk were the first to gain major international, critical and commercial success, and getting widespread airplay on MTV thanks to their hyper-stylish and creative videos directed by the likes of Spike Jonze and Michael Gondry. And so as a result, once Daft Punk had made their mark and brought the French scene to an international audience, tons of artists from this scene then started to gain international success in the years following. You had success from the funkier side of the movement with artists like Cassius, Etienne de Créchy, Mojo, and Le Rhythm Digital. You had success from the weirder side of the movement via the likes of Mr. Oiseau and Laurent Garnier, and you even had some downtempo and trip-hop from the likes of Air. And then now, right throughout the 2010s, you have megatons of electronic movements and trends and major electronic artists that all originate from France, which all have a clear influence linking directly back to Daft Punk, not just in the huge EDM success from the likes of David Guetta. You've also had the massive phenomenon of synthwave, which heavily originates from France via artists like Kavinsky, Geschaffelstein, M83, Carpenter Brut, and Madian, of which the influence of Daft Punk is even more clear when you realise that the first major synthwave success, Nightcall by Kavinsky and Lovefox, was co-written and co-produced by Guy Manuel, along with the heavy new disco and funk revival element in a lot of these modern French house artists, including Breakbot and Sebastian. But nowhere is the influence of Daft Punk on the French electronic scene more clear than in regards to the duo Justice, the most well-known and successful artist on the main French house record label, Ed Banger, where, let's face it, they are thoroughly Daft Punk inspired, from the fact that they're a duo, from the fact that they have their logo stitched to the back of leather biker jackets they wear, much in the manner of Daft Punk have always done. And it's just so evident in their music. Their more funkier tracks like DANCE is clearly evidently inspired by tracks from Discovery. Their more rougher and grittier tracks like Stress clearly hark back to the more rougher and grittier Daft Punk tracks like Rollin' and Scratchin' from Homework. It's just a testament to how important Daft Punk have been to the emergence of French electronica and bringing it to a mass audience. Which brings me on to the next major part of their legacy, firmly establishing nu disco as a major style. So what is nu disco? Well, it's extremely similar to French house to the extent where there often isn't a differentiation between the styles, but nu disco is basically, similarly with Chicago house, when a hyperactive, sugary house dance track is based around a sample from a 70s funk track, stuff like that. Daft Punk helped bring this style to major success, firstly in the fact that they technically produced the biggest selling nu disco track of the 1990s of the track Music Sounds Better With You, which was by the French house duo Stardust, one member of which is Thomas Bangalter. But along with the fact that they absolutely mastered and made the absolute masterwork, masterpiece of this whole subgenre, the album Discovery. And once this album arrived and sent shockwaves, literally every major dance producer was trying to copy the nu disco style, and it spread right throughout the charts, from hit singles from the likes of the Shapeshifters, Milo, Mojo, Roger Sanchez, Eric Prydz, and then basically, as a result, this recontextualised disco for the 21st century, taking it from being one of the most uncool of genres from the 1970s to something that could once again become a major part of pop music. And it did in the years immediately following Discovery's release. You had very disco-based releases from the likes of George Michael, from the Scissor Sisters, and most successfully via Madonna on her album Confessions on a Dance Floor. So, if you ever hear a disco influence in a modern pop track, be it by Janelle Monáe or Robin, or even in a remix work by one of the more recent acclaimed nu disco dance acts, such as Horse Meat Disco, Purple Disco Machine, or DJ Koze, we can link that firmly back to Daft Punk firmly establishing the style in popular contemporary music as we know it. One thing that's often not talked about in regards to the 2010s is that Daft Punk pretty much have an entire subgenre inspired by them, and that is of course future funk, the spin-off from vaporwave and another major cult internet subgenre. But this time, instead of sugary house tracks sampling 70s funk, it's sugary house tracks that sample from 80s Japanese city pop. But the influence is firmly there. The tracks are firmly in the style of the hyperactive but feel-good funky dance tracks from Discovery, and even down to the way future funk presents itself, where it's based around mixing this style with visuals from 80s and 90s anime. Something which Daft Punk pioneered on the album Discovery, where an entire anime film was made to coincide with the album and to tell the story that the tracks do, that film being Interstellar 5555, with its influence on the future funk style being so evident in the fact that many future funk videos on YouTube actually use clips from Interstellar 5555. And whilst on the topic of dance music, they are often considered the most influential artist in terms of changing EDM. And how do they most majorly change EDM outside of the nu disco and French house scenes? In terms of the visual aspect, Daft Punk were really unique and ahead of their time in terms of using helmets and costumes to hide their two identities, basically to let the music speak for itself, so that you just saw them as robots, as characters producing music. No sordid details of their private life or any paparazzi or tabloid-like drama could get in the way of the music in that case. You saw the personas that produced the music, you didn't see the people behind it. And so, as a result of this, it's become a major aspect of some of the most successful EDM DJs to have a signature costume and helmet to go with their persona, most notably in the later 2000s via the likes of deadmau5, continuing in France via the likes of Geschafelstein, and most recently via Marshmello. But not just aside from in costume, they also changed the presentation of EDM in terms of how EDM concerts were done, with their revolutionary concert, Alive 2011, with their revolutionary tour, Alive 2007, one of only two concert tours, the other being in 1997, where they went full extravagant with a giant neon pyramid and light show, setting the standard for EDM light shows, which were going to change how all EDM live performances would be done. So all those major laser light shows you get at events like Tomorrowland, you probably wouldn't have them if Daft Punk hadn't pioneered that touring style on Alive. In fact, Skrillex at one point even said in an interview that he probably wouldn't have even taken to EDM had he not seen Alive 2007. Argue with speed without hesitation. Click on part 2 for where I talk about their influence on indie and recent pop music.